Welcome everyone to Voice of Terminus Tavern Talk. Yes, it's Tavern Talk today. As you guys know, we decided to do the Tavern Talk every 2 weeks to actually bring you some news and give us some time to prepare better. I'm joined today by Lex. Say hello, Lex.
Hello, people.
And by Joshua. Say hello, Josh.
Hey guys.
So today we have a few things lined up, and the first one will be talking about the VR interview on MMORPG.com with Tim Convo Walton. I hope I'm not slaughtering his name. A good interview talking about Pantheon and industry jobs and the role that Convo plays within VR as the lead tester. And then we have the top five Pantheon moments from MMORPG.com. Their top 5 moments on why they think Pantheon is going to be awesome. Then we'll be talking about Nick Hotz for you guys out there, Woolet, and his knowledge base that he's put out. Nick's been doing some summaries the past couple of months, and we'll bring that up to give you guys some in-depth knowledge on Pantheon for everybody out there. Definitely check it out. We'll bring that up when we get to it. And then our main discussion today, is class and race chart. We're going to talk about the previously released races and classes chart that was put out there. There's definitely some points on there that deserve a interesting discussion. And then we have obviously all the screenshots that VR posted the last couple of weeks, and other news. Lex, how's the stream coming on your end?
There were minor stutters at the beginning.
Okay.
It seems to be going pretty good now on my end of game.
Let's start off briefly going into the interview. So Brad McQuaid, Tim Convo Walton, and Ben D did a interview talking about Pantheon, VR mainly, and how Tim came about getting involved, and it's very in-depth discussion talking about the industry and how it's evolved and what primary roles Tim plays and how it came about. So if you haven't seen that, check it out. And the top 5 Pantheon moments, let me go and have a look. So let me go and bring that up for you guys, the top 5 Pantheon moments. Number 5 is playing with friends. Number 4 is your character will learn the land. And number 3, a variety of races and classes that complement each other. Number 2 is abilities as loot. And number 1, the mana and land system. So those are some of the exciting points that MMORPG are looking forward to. If you haven't given it a read, check it out. Alexa's posting the links as we are speaking. So yeah, definitely check that out. So let me go and bring up Nick Hot's Woolet's knowledge base. It's definitely very, very, very interesting. It's a summary of everything related to VR and Pantheon. I'll bring it up on the screen right now. If you're interested in the game, want to know what it's all about, he's got a few other information compilations on there. Pantheon January 2017 Roundup, December 2016 Roundup, Pantheon Stream 3 summary, some of the things that caught the eye and everything. And then he's done this knowledge base, which is pretty cool. Overview of the game. You can basically click on the links and it will basically take you there. And the Pantheon difference, the game itself, lore features, media concept arts is all put in here, and the races themselves as well, what available classes there are, etc. Then he's got the classes again listed up. So definitely something to pass on to friends, people that are interested in the game, to give them a good overview, in-depth viewpoint of what to look forward to, what to expect from Pantheon. Developer blogs are posted in there, all the newsletters that you could find are rounded up. pledge packages, official links, social media accounts, etc. So it's an awesome
Past
job.
videos, etc. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. One of the best things about this knowledge base is, say you go on vacation or life gets busy and you can't really keep an eye on Pantheon for a week or two or even a month or more. This is going to be a great place where you can go back to it, give it a quick browse, see if anything's new, and then you can actually look into it without having to scour all these other websites. So this is definitely something that I'm bookmarking.
Definitely.
Yep.
So keep an eye out for him. Follow him on Twitter to get all the latest. Give him a shout out as well. Fantastic job what he's put together here in that short time. Keep it up. We look forward to seeing next month's.
Yeah, very, very well done.
Yep. So let's get into what we are here for today. As you guys know, we have no VR or Twitter news or anything like that. There's nothing worth mentioning apart from maybe this faint death. I think that's the best faint death ever that could be done. That was posted by VR on Twitter. I think that's awesome.
Very cool.
So let's bring up the class chart. So as you guys know, VR put it out there. The races and the classes that are going to be available to us. So we're going to try and break it down, talk about some of the things that might seem odd to one or the other person, whatever. And let me go and basically bring it down. We'll talk about the archive first. And then I'm going to ask Lex and Josh what they think, if it's good, evil, neutral, if we're going to go and base it off of these things. So the Archai have Bard, Druid, Monk, Shaman, Warrior, and Wizard. What's your take on this, guys? We'll start with you, Lex.
Well, there's a couple things in here that kind of threw me for a loop. The most prominent being the Monk for the Dark Mirror and the Scar. Not to mention the Rogue for the Scar. I really didn't expect those. I'm kind of happy to see them because if we got basically the class layout that I was expecting, I'm going to be honest, I would have been disappointed. So I'm very happy with what I'm seeing. There are a few things that I'm kind of like, okay, but they're not classes or races I plan to play anyway, so meh.
So do you think the Archai are primarily good, neutral,
I believe so.
evil?
I believe so. The Bard would make me lean towards that pretty heavily. Plus, their lore suggests that they're very joyous, which means they would probably try to stay away from darker emotions, which would specifically be classified with evil races.
Yeah. I agree with Lex. I would say this is a good race. If you look at every one of theirs that they've chosen, the Bard, the Druid, the Monk, Shaman, Warrior, and Wizard, they all lean towards something neutral to good type of alignments, and no real evil running through any of those guys.
Yeah,
so yeah, happy with that.
Basically, kind of indicates. Yeah, I can agree with that. So we'll put those on the good side of things. So let's go and talk a bit about the Darkmere. Actually, the second widest choice of classes available
Just
goes
surprising.
to the Darkmere, which is very surprising actually.
Yes, it is.
I'm going to go out there for me and say that they are of pure evil. Basing this off the fact that they can have the Direlord, the Necromancer, technically two classes that tend to be of the evil portion of things if we go with that alignment. I'm actually pretty happy with the choices they have. There's nothing out of the ordinary for me, to be honest, with the Darkmere. Some people debated with me the choice of Cleric, and the way I see it, there are different religious versions of Clerics. There's the Clerics that seek the Enlightenment, and there's the Clerics that seek the Darkness. And technically, for me, this kind of also brings up something else, what we'll get into later on. So it makes perfect sense for me, and I'm happy as well because it's put me basically on. I can play
Cloud 9.
Cloud 9. I can play every race or every class that I want to with the race that I want to. So I'm happy with
See,
that.
I would
For me,
expect people to contest the Dark Mirror Druid over the Cleric. That's just me. They're water beings.
Yeah. And my feeling is that they actually may be not just aligned to evil, but neutral and evil. So they could set in two areas, ultimately, at the end of the day. There's nothing really saying that one race has to be one type of alignment.
Well, if we think back on their lore, the Darkmere, there was two factions within the Darkmere. You had the Dreadmere that were briefly announced, and they were basically forced out of their planet, and their goddess basically got slaughtered, and they had to slaughter her before their eyes to survive, etc. So you technically could be right there, neutral or more towards evil, basically splitting up the two factions that they have. So it's definitely very, very interesting. Anything else to add there for you, Lex, on the Darkmere?
Not really. I was kind of just taken by surprise by the sheer amount of classes that they can be. But like I've said before in other shows, there's not a whole lot that we have to go on, even in the respect of lore. The lore is, granted, it's very good. There's just not a whole lot of meat to it. So it's hard to really tell if there's going to be sub-factions within this race that can facilitate a lot of things here. Also, for some reason, your Twitch broadcast is not loading for me.
Okay. Can you give everybody a link to Beam? We'll have to have a look into that, why Twitch isn't working today. Everything on my end looks perfectly fine. There's no drop frames or anything like that. We'll have to have a look into that and figure out what's going on. So, guys, use the link that Lex just posted and connect to Beam. We'll try and figure out why these issues are turning up today, and you'll have to either catch the video on replay or on YouTube when we upload it later. So let's go move on to the dwarf, and I
just want to touch back on the Darkmere.
Go on then.
Just one last comment is that them being water based, I'm quite curious to find out if the druid is going to actually be subterranean or have certain terrains linked to the druid types, so they draw their power from different terrains. That's
a very interesting idea.
Well, if you think about it, it's definitely interesting, and the reason why I support druid towards the Mere and why it makes perfect sense for me is because water is one of the elements of nature. So technically, being a druid, it would be able to work with the water. The Darkmere were given one lung, they were given legs to walk on land, etc. So that's where it kind of connects to me, and I've always gotten a connection to nature from the Mere throughout the lore, that they connect to nature. It's definitely very strange because they have all three. Well, actually, no, they don't. They don't have shaman, for instance. Okay, no. So I didn't see that. So shaman. So they have cleric,
and they don't have ranger.
And they don't have ranger. Yes, that's why it makes sense for me. Basically, I see them using water as an element, and because they are a water race, technically the druid fits there, whereas a shaman would not fit there.
Yeah, basically. I just don't see them using bows underneath the water, so I think that's why that one was excluded.
So let's go on to the dwarf, and there's actually some debating. I've talked to a few people. I've seen a few posts, a bit of chatter about the dwarves. One thing some people can't get on with is the fact that the dwarves have Paladin as a possible tank class. Another thing I'm going to get into in a bit after we've basically just briefly touched on these races. We're going to talk a bit about why we think certain things fit the way they do, and bring in some wild speculation on some of the ideas that could be in the minds of VR and why they're doing certain things. So the Paladin is the odd one out for me within the dwarves.
There's a couple of odd one things out as well, my mind. Yeah.
But it makes sense to me to some point, and I'll explain that in a bit. So what about you, Josh? You were already saying basically the dwarves.
Well, yeah, I find that a dwarven enchanter, for instance, kind of is also out there as well. I like the fact that they've got all these. They've got spice in the actual dwarven classes that they go that they usually don't have normally in a lot of MMOs. A dwarven rogue, for instance, you don't expect a dwarf to be agile, so fitting into a rogue type of class is going to look kind of weird. Yeah, exactly. And they don't have the most melodic of voices either, so a dwarven bard at the end of the day. But it is quite interesting to see, and I'm actually glad that they do have these different choices for the dwarf itself.
Yeah,
my feeling.
Lex?
I'm kind of on the same boat. To a certain respect, the bard really stands out to me as something that's like, whoa, I never expected that. Paladin, I'm an old school EverQuester, so that makes perfect sense to me. The rogue, it makes sense to me as well because I'm just so used to seeing it in EverQuest. The enchanter is a very, very nice and probably overdue surprise for dwarves, but I mean, I won't get into it. We kind of know why they're there now. I was actually really, really surprised that if you have an enchanter, you don't have another magic caster type. I was really expecting it to, it's like when I first saw it, I was like, whoa. Then when I got over the shock, I was like, wait, there might be another one. Which would be like, oh my god, mind blown. And it's like, oh, it never came. But I understand why. So
let's go move on to the elves. They have, I think, the third most available to them. And there was also...
We said dwarves are good. Dwarves are good.
Yeah.
Ultimately. They are a good race.
The elves, like I said, have the third most available to them. And there was also some discussions on, why warrior and, why not paladin. And for me personally, it makes absolute sense that the elves would not have a paladin, which we'll get into again in a bit when we've gone through them. So that's the one that basically stands out for me. Cleric, for me, also makes sense that the elves would not have a cleric. Shaman and druid, is it druid? Druid and shaman, yep, definitely are the two healing classes that I definitely see the elves having. But we'll get into that, or I'll get into that when we get to that portion. So what about you guys? What stands out for you on the elves?
Yeah, I would say that nothing really is a big negative for the elves itself. Everything feels kind of standard for them. The elven bard is standard, druids. The elves just seem to be standard race for everything, for the most part, in my mind, through MMOs through the times. So nothing is foreign here.
Cool.
Yeah,
Lex?
Actually, for me, I can't wrap my head around an elf shaman. I just can't do it. I mean, I understand warrior because from the if you take their past games, well, I'll use EverQuest 1 as an example. Every race had, the core classes that they needed, so that right out of the gate, even if you were next door to another race or on the other side of a world, you had everything available to you to do anything. So you had your tank and your healer. So every race had all that set up. And that's what I'm seeing here as well. And that's kind of why I feel like they have the warrior, because from their lore, I don't know, it never came off as the warrior type for me. But it's just that's shaman, man. That is completely blowing my mind.
I'll get into that as well, Lex, in a bit. Let's move on to the halflings. As far as I can tell, that makes absolute sense. They're spot on with that. I'm gonna go and say they're a good race.
Mm-hmm.
I would definitely.
I would say
tend towards good, neutral.
They're begrudgingly good.
Yeah. Good way to put it, Lex. The classes they have available make the most sense. Although
to me, they're the most boring at the
Although
moment.
I must admit I'm missing some kind of mage class, because if we look back at the lore, they have 3 different factions. The scholars, more or less, where I would like to see some kind of mage, enchanter, summoner, etc., or wizard even, where it would make sense for me. Then they have the fighting faction, the warriors basically. That would be obviously your warrior. And then they have the adventuring portion, the people that like to go outside and adventure. So that's your bard and your rogue and your ranger. etc.
Yep.
So it definitely makes sense. I'm definitely missing on the scholar side of things some kind of mage. I would have been happy to see a mage there, but they have their reasons to why it's like this.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what basically stands out for me on the halflings.
They should have given the halfling Dire Lord, I think.
They don't deserve
Evil
it.
little bastard.
They don't deserve to have Dire Lords.
Yeah. So,
But no, definitely casting. They should have had some sort of casting. Yeah.
So we could
from
go on, Lex.
Good.
No, go on.
I was gonna say from the lore, it certainly does suggest that they do have some sort of magic caster, and I'm really shocked that they don't have like the wizard class.
Yeah. So do we really need to talk about the humans?
No.
They have
boring. I mean, sorry, flexible.
Humans, we are a fantastic breed of individuals. On Terminus, in virtual reality and in real life, we can do almost anything. So I guess it's fair to say that the humans have everything at their arsenal. We are a very interesting breed of individuals throughout the animal kingdom, and if anybody could do it, it's us humans that could do everything. We're very
versatile,
quick study, versatile, etc. So
it's a very safe choice for VR.
Yeah, definitely. So let's go into a interesting one in the gnomes. We have Enchanter, Necromancer, Rogue, Summoner, and Wizard, and that makes absolute sense from the viewpoint.
The most interesting looking
from
as
the
well.
lore, definitely. Yeah, and the funny thing is that they're really breaking the mold here, because, like I said, with EverQuest 1, they always made sure every race was set up with enough to do well. So these guys don't have a tank. They don't have a healer. They're strictly casters and the rogue, I think. So
well, they're made out of power, aren't they?
That's true. So I've got this sinking suspicion that they're going to be very, very close to probably the humans for starting. Because that way, if someone makes a gnome and their group needs a tank or a healer, they can just yell at the humans.
Although they are looking kind of an evilish race.
They look evil.
So I would pair them more with the ogres then, ultimately, if they're going to be looking for a tanky type of protection.
If you guys remember basically the lore, if you think back on the lore, they were kind of like, live and let be. They didn't have any kind of faction towards good or evil. They were kind of like, if you leave us alone, we can get along. We get along with everybody as long as you don't try and push our boundaries. So I'm seeing them as purely neutral, and they can go either way, whatever they pick.
Although the necromancer throws a banner in the works there.
And although the necromancer throws it in there, you're absolutely right. The necromancer is what would basically put them towards being evil. For sure.
Well, it's more neutral, but they don't give away. They don't discriminate in their culture between what magic is good or evil. They just say it's magic. We're gonna use it.
Exactly.
But because they have very limited class selection, I can almost guarantee you that they'll be located very close to either a class that has an overwhelmingly large number of selections or another race that has very, very few, in order to help balance it out. And just because, I mean, let's face it, if you put the gnomes out in the middle of nowhere by themselves, it's going to take forever to do anything, because you don't have a tank, you don't have a healer.
And if you look at the gnomes again, Josh, I see them being virtually neutral. It's just a choice, a life choice they're going to take, because it's even stated in the law that they're basically a live and let live. You know, we can get along as long as you don't push our buttons. So, like Lex has already pointed out, they are of the mystical magics. So everything that's magic, they're going to assume. Their life entity is basically it's a wisp. And it's magic, basically, a magic cloth that's forming that bodily form for them, and that mask basically giving them a face, etc. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to, roam the world of Terminus. So I'm seeing them more as a neutral, and whatever life's choice, they might want to go in and damp it into the darker sides of magic with necromancy, and this, that, and the other. And if you think about necromancy in general, or summoner as well, I can kind of see that being linked to how they get their life form.
Yes.
Yep.
Using necromancy and using summoning of some sorts to actually
I would have interested them
beyond the planet of Terminus, to actually roam around and engage with all the other races there. So that's how I kind of see it coming in, why there's necromancer on that list, which we technically define as evil. So let's go and look at the ogres, who have the least classes available. And if we look at the classes, they have 2 technically tank classes and 2 technically healer classes, and nothing in between. There's no monks, there's no rogues, there's no
damage dealers per se,
rangers or anything like that. There's no DPS whatsoever within that race. And I am actually 100% on board with the choice of ogre. It makes, for me personally, it makes absolute sense to go down that path, especially with the shaman and druid. I think they fit perfectly into that ogre world, based on the lore, based on the way they seem to represent themselves and live throughout the world, being more of a simple race, using stone and wood and nature to their advantage, etc. That's why I see shaman and druid fitting perfectly for them. If they're going to dabble in any kind of spiritual or healing form, it would be within those 2 healer classes.
Yeah. If the lore decided to extend upon maybe a little bit of the ogre religion, I'd probably be fully accepting of the druid. But druid to me seems like a stretch. I'm sorry. Because this is a warlike race. They're not worried about the posies in the field and the trees and the animals. They're not worried about that. They're worried about conquest, finding their enemies, overwhelming them, and destroying them. Shaman, I can understand that because a lot of warrior cultures have a very large emphasis on their ancestry. So shaman could fit in that respect. But I just don't see the druid. I'm sorry.
Well, I can see them using nature to destroy their enemies quite easily. Earthquakes, shock, pulling up trees and smashing the enemies where they stand. It could be an extension of their nature, the link to nature, but also destructive nature itself. Exactly. So it can definitely lean that way. For me, it would have been nice ultimately to see some sort of mage class to it, and I know Jan disagrees with me, but if they had touched on the enchanter, would have been nice as well at some point. But I'm happy with their choices.
Cool. Lex, you got anything to add, or do you want to get into
your? Well, if you were to merge the ogre and the gnome trees, I think you'd have a very well-rounded duo there.
Yeah, definitely. I can see those two working cool.
The Gnoga.
Okay, taking bets. Taking bets. The gnomes and the ogres are going to be very close to each other.
That's my thinking as well.
Taking all bets.
So if you want to go and bet, we'll put that up on Twitter later. Lexa is placing a bet that the gnomes and the ogre will be very close, holding hands, working together, living together. So let's go and talk about your beloved Scar, Mr. Scarface. And as I see from the choices they have available, it's actually the two classes that you want to play, and they're available for the Scar, so that makes you really happy. So we have the Dire Lord, the Monk, the Necromancer, the Rogue, the Shaman, and the Warrior.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I gotta tell you, I accept the fact that the Scar have Monk. Although, because at first I really didn't see it, but now I kind of do, more in the brawler sense of a Monk from EverQuest 2. Because basically just hand-to-hand fighting. I mean, if Scar would use their hands, then they would fight. They would use whatever they can. So that I accept that now. The Shaman, I can kind of accept that. The Rogue really took me by surprise, even though my money's on Scar Racial's promoting DPS over survivability. Warrior, absolutely. I thought that instead of getting a Monk, they would just solidify the Warrior role. I'm so happy that they get a Necromancer, because that'll be my alt. And just Dire Lord! But yeah, I first saw their class selection, and I was like, that's Ixar right there, except for a Rogue. And I even kind of joked with some people saying that that's the Ixar tree, but to make it look like they didn't copy it, they threw the Rogue in. And everyone's like, oh my god, he's right. And it was just like, I'm not really, but it's funny to think about.
What about you, Josh?
Quite honestly, the Scar, the evil buggers. So it fits with Lex perfectly.
Just ask Alexa, she knows.
So let's go in.
Yeah, so good.
Let's go and move on to some of the points that we talked through. Some of the things that kind of stuck out, and why some of these choices make sense in our very own opinion. Like, I'm going to go and start off with the elves, for instance. I'm going to go and address 2 points. Number one from Lexa, the Shaman, why I actually see that fitting the elves. And the second point that was in a few discussions that I got to involve myself with, the fact that elves don't have Paladin as a class. So for me personally, if we look at elves and we view the history of elves and their being in no matter whatever form, whatever game, whatever movie you've ever seen, whatever book you've read, elves generally have always seen humans as lesser beings, younglings, if you will. It doesn't matter if you go with dark elves, if you go with wood elves, high elves, etc. Elves will always view the humans as lesser younglings, lesser beings, etc. And they would never take on a human construct, which is the Paladin. The Paladin, for me, is something that the humans created. Even in our own culture, our own real life, Paladins were actually a thing. There were tanks that were called Paladins throughout history. So that's where, for me, it makes sense that the elves do not have Paladin. Now, there was also some controversy on dwarves and Paladin, which kind of like makes no sense to me, but there was discussions on it, why the dwarves would take on a Paladin class. If any class relatedly close to humans would take on anything from the humans, it would be a Paladin. The dwarves would take on the Paladin class. especially from the lore. If you look at Dwarven lore, Paladin fits perfectly. And there's a third point that I want to touch on as well with the Enchanter, which I'll get into in a minute. But now let me quickly go and talk on the Shaman from my viewpoint. Why Shaman fits Elves. If we look at Elves, and you've read plenty of books about Elves, you've played plenty of games about Elves, you watched plenty of movies about Elves.
What if you've cooked plenty of Elves?
Elves can, or have been able to, connect to the spiritual world. They have a long life span, etc. So that's why I see Shaman actually fitting into the Elven history, because if a race can connect to the spiritual world, an elf could. An elf has an insight into the future, into the past. That's why I see the Shaman fitting into the Elven choice of classes. Now, the last thing I want to touch on was the Enchanter, real quick, for the Dwarves. Lex brought that up, that basically he felt that was like kind of odd, but there's definitely reasoning to it. If you look at the Dwarves and you read the lore through the Dwarves and everything, Enchanter doesn't necessarily, I don't view it exactly 100% from a class point of view. I view it from a general point of view, enchanting. If you think about Dwarves, you think about working with various metals of higher degree, be it gold,
and stone,
be it mithril and stone, be it moonstone, etc. So that's where the enchanting point comes and makes sense to me from that perspective, that if they're going to go and dabble with various stones and gems and raw higher materials, they would be able to use that as an advantage in with the enchanter. That's where I see that coming into play from that point of view.
And just to add to that, simply that the history of dwarves have been runestones and runes with in the rock itself to give them their power. So that's definitely an aspect of the dwarves I can see happening as well. Enchanting the stuff, enchanting their weapons, enchanting the rock, enchanting.
Well, technically, like, you know, if you read a lot of these fantasy novels and such or play live games, dwarven casters are generally rune masters or rune whatever. Technically, aren't they just enchanting stones anyway? They're enchanting the runes. So
yes, exactly.
To simplify things or to take it down to a basic manner, technically, isn't that just a different form of enchanter?
Yes.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's why I was like, in the end, I'm okay with it, personally. Yeah. Sorry, didn't mean
so there's a discussion going on in chat about the Paladin. I can see. Very interesting. Josh, you got anything to add on those 3 points, or you, Lex?
I think it would have been nice for maybe 2 or 3 other races, or maybe another race to at least have the paladin side of things. To be stuck just with the dwarf and the humans seems quite limiting, I think. Because I can see other classes really needing some sort of a paladin type construct. And maybe not paladins, but yeah, there is a dire lord as well. And yeah, but I agree with your outlook on the shaman. I think that the shaman itself should be part of the elves, and any class that's dealing with nature and spiritual side of things.
So let's go and quickly touch on the dire lord and paladin discussion and get involved in there. Those are definitely, for me personally, you know, they are mirrors of themselves. One dabbing in the arcane good side of things, which would be the paladin, and then you have your dire lord messing in the dark side of things. So it's dark and light, basically. You've got the dire lord on one side, and you've got the paladin on the other. And if you would basically smash those two together, you know, it would nothing. It would it would balance itself completely. They would balance. They are, for me personally, constructs of one another. Two hybrid classes. Paladins are generally good. If you look back in history, for Paladins, because we can actually view that in history, Paladins are basically the Holy Guard, the Holy Knights of the priesthood. That's where Paladins basically came from. They were the Holy Guards that went out and did God's deed. They went out and basically sought out revenge through the hand of God. That's what.
And that's where they derive their, and that's where they derive their powers ultimately, in order to be able to take on the evil.
Yep. Unfortunately, because it's a video game, to make such a broad assumption on something like a paladin versus anti-paladin, or just saying the paladin is evil, you really make unnecessary complexity for the video game. It's so much easier to just say, like, this is the good one, this is the bad one, because it separates, it's easy to document, it doesn't muck up the works. So while it's easy to say, yes, a paladin can worship a dark god, or the dark powers that be, technically the paladin's definition is a champion of good. You know, the holy warrior, the guy who's here to protect you. If he's following an evil deity, he's no longer concerned with being good, doing good works and protecting people. He's more concerned with himself and hurting anyone in his path. That goes completely against the principles of being good. Therefore, you wouldn't really call yourself a paladin, because that would associate you with this good, almost reputation. So it almost calls for a whole new class name.
And Naomi's put it right, basically. If a pally would do unlawful things, you know, God would step in, and he would lose his blessing. And if he would go and do evil things, he would become more towards a dire lord. He would start learning the dark arts of things, basically. That's how I kind of view it. But anyway, let's go and talk a bit about the clerics, because this is where we're going to get into full-blown speculation right now. The way they've put out the clerics and the choices they've put them in is very, very interesting. For me, the clerics, druids and shamans scream archetype healers. They are not the definitive form of what your healer is going to be. And I'll explain why I think this is so. Because if we look at the humans and we say they are neutral, and we look at the dwarves, we say they are good, and we look at the Darkmere, we say they are evil. They all have one thing in common: they can call upon a cleric. And we know in history, clerics have the light side and there is the dark side of clergy. So I'm going to go and presume that somehow, depending on what race you pick, based on the cleric, will define how you're going to play your cleric in-game, meaning that there's going to be a bit of variance on the play styles, on the spells available to you maybe as a cleric. One dealing maybe on the arcane side, one dealing maybe on the dark arcane or physical arcane, or whatever you want to say, basically mixing it up. So I kind of think that for me personally, it screams archetype and screams also variance within that class. The same goes for shaman and the druid, because they are all over the place. They're on the good side, they're on the neutral side, they're on the evil side. So I'm guessing that the three healer classes are pure archetypes, and you will define that role within the game itself, which I think would be, if that is the case, would be a bold move. And kudos to VR for going that stretch, that extra mile, I mean, there's a lot
If it
of
indeed
controversy
happens.
if it indeed happens, because there's a lot of controversy going on with how they've designed the classes, what classes are available to the race and everything, and it takes guts. It takes guts to redefine the industry, redefine what we think of these classes. There's nothing wrong, as far as I'm concerned, with the choices they've made. It doesn't have to necessarily always be the same, as long as they keep to the basics, which they have done, in my point of view. And I would love to see that happen, because obviously Dialord and Paladin can't be archetypes. They are already defined roles as they are within themselves. There's no advancing a Dialord, there's no advancing a Paladin. But the Cleric and the Shaman and the Druid, for instance, scream to me that depending on what race you pick for that class will define the different playstyle that's going to have for you as a healer playing a Cleric, Shaman or Druid. And if that is the case, I'm sold. I'm 100% there. I think that's insane. It takes guts to do it. And that's how I basically see this happening.
Yeah.
I'll agree with that, but I'll expand on that. Yeah.
Go on in.
I'll just expand on and say that they might throw a curveball and actually make the Dialord actually split off even further down the line, depending on the choices that it makes as well. You know, if VR are going to do something with the Cleric, the Druid, and the Shaman, is what you're saying, that those are your base classes. It could be the same for the Dialord and Enchanter. I don't see why they couldn't do it for all of them. They'll be very
different degrees.
Exactly, and it could look down the line, maybe at level 30, level 40, you're making a different choice and splitting it off to become something else.
Yeah.
So EverQuest 2 tried that right at the beginning, but they failed horribly in the system that they tried to make it, where they split it off from the beginning. But I really do have faith in VR that if they do something like that, they'll succeed in it.
EverQuest 2 had a very good idea. It was just very poorly executed. And I still believe to this day that if they had bothered to redesign it, it would have still worked perfectly fine. Because gameplay-wise, it was different. It was interesting. It just took too freaking long to do anything. But anyway. The thing, like, I would love the fact that if you had more definition towards your own character. In EverQuest 1 thing that it was completely superficial, but I loved it, was when you go from level 1 to like 49, you are a Shadow Knight. And then you hit 50 and all of a sudden you're like, if you're still a Shadow Knight, but if someone were to do a search for your name where it lists your class and where you are and all that, it would actually say a different class. It would say like Grave Lord. I think that was at 60 though. You got a title, I think it was like at 51, 55, and 60. Instead of those just being superficial changes, it would be very, very nice to be like, hey, here's a little quest to change your character, give them a little customization. I would love that. I would love that to death.
Yeah.
I mean,
Lex.
I would make random characters just to see what kind of customizations they get at those levels.
Lex would love. Now, here's something that you might have missed on our Dialord show, on the Scar. He would love the Dialord to become a Lich.
No, that's more of a necromancer.
Or the Necromancer.
A necromancer to become a Lich.
Well, that's a whole different story. That's the whole thing. That's like
the same tenant.
Yeah.
The crowning jewel of a necromancer is become a lich. But no game ever lets you do it.
But same with the Rogue though as well. If we look at the Rogue real quick, the Rogue does not, scream for me, you're a Rogue, therefore you are evil. You're just a Rogue. But what makes you evil is, maybe going down a different path and becoming maybe an assassin. And if you're going to be good, you might be the swashbuckler or the brigand or whatever. So there's a lot of room for speculation and tweaking and maybe actually going down.
But there's certainly enough lore out there, isn't there?
And definitely a lot of lore to support all of this.
A ton of lore through the history of fantasy to split them up at any one point. So if you have a look, I mean, I'll go back to EverQuest 2 as well. Currently what they're doing is you get to level 100 and you get your Ascension classes. So you got the 4 different classes. And similar thing can happen over here. When you get to level 50, you suddenly you're not a monk anymore, but you're a bruiser, or you're a, I don't know, whatever.
One thing I just want to quickly bring up as well is Death by Snoo Snoo. He's technically right. When we look at the elves again, cleric would technically fit in that realm. But if we look at the lore of the elves again, they were a almost destroyed race. They were not very. They weren't very advanced as well. They were fighting to survive, to be what they are. They weren't very advanced, etc. So these are kind of like, you know, worn down. We've been kicked in the butt.
Lost
we
their
have to
faith.
start all over again. Lost their faith, kind of thing. So that's why I can see the cleric missing on that chart. Technically, Death by Snoo Snoo is right. Cleric would fit into the elven.
It has traditionally in a lot of games.
In a lot of games, but from the lore point of view, that's where I say it. You know, it's a very good choice, and you know it makes sense based on the lore.
But to similar what you said as well, is that a paladin not fitting in with the elven being a human construct. In this situation, cleric could also be the same, in the sense that, you know, ultimately the elves, if they are going to get some sort of healing, they're going to do it through nature. They're going to focus on nature to be the healing self for them, to make sure that that's what drives them forward. So a cleric just doesn't fit in with them in this scenario, I think.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, their lore was basically, they're now basically of the land, versus being like in their own little walled-in city and just looking down on everybody. So that makes Druid absolutely fit. And at that point, you kind of gotta look at it and say, okay, which healer are they going to get? This one or this one? I think the shaman would be closer to the quote-unquote of the land mentality than a cleric would. A cleric kind of fits more into civilization, more structure. So I can accept that. Yeah. But it is something you do traditionally see in almost every game. An elf is very, very, it's just like a one-off human.
And the thing to point out though as well with VR is that, you know, if you look at the gnome for instance, it's completely redefined how we see gnomes and how we've got to know them throughout the MMO industry, etc. These are space gnomes, right? We should trust in them to redefine. You know, it doesn't have to be the same way it has been for the last 20 odd years in the industry. There's nothing wrong with redefining, tweaking up, changing out some of the things,
right.
As long as they are in the realm of reason, which they seem they seem to be spot on with the realm of reason.
Right.
So it makes perfect sense, and we should encourage more game developers to go outside the box and try and redefine and tweak up the way we view these races. Just because we got to know and love them that certain way doesn't mean they're going to be any less interesting or any less fun or any less, you know, of their class, of their race.
Mm-hmm.
It takes guts to do this.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, look at every single race. We have a small twist on everything, which, I mean, you can't just take what everybody knows of MMOs or of this high fantasy MMO and just turn it upside down and expect it to be a success. Ain't gonna work, in a way. But when you put slight twists on things, that makes it interesting. It helps the whole genre evolve because people all of a sudden go, hey, they stepped out of the box. Well, I'll go as far as they did and to take another step, you know? So, I mean, look at down the line. Look at the lore of all these races. Even, you know, gnomes got a huge twist to them. Ogres got a small twist. Elves have a small twist. Dwarves have a small twist. Everything is a little different than what we expect. And to be honest, it is damn refreshing.
Yeah. It is.
Yeah, I agree.
So one question I do want to bring up, actually two, if we can, Monk and Scar. Obviously, there's reason to debate that. There's actually a lot of debating, or was a lot of questioning going on in chat as well about the Scar Monk. That's one thing I want to quickly, briefly touch upon from your viewpoints, guys. And then I want to quickly ask this final question on the race and class chart. Do you see any of the races at a disadvantage?
Gnomes.
And ogres.
And ogres. Yeah.
Do you find it fair?
I think it's fair from a lore perspective. I don't think it's fair from a gameplay perspective. But if they start in the same zone or like the next zone over, then it's fair gameplay wise as well, because then they can help each other.
Mm.
Yeah. So what about the Monk and the Scar?
Well, okay. Here's the thing with Monk and Scars. Because I'm honestly 50-50 split on this particular topic. I like it and I don't like it. I don't like it because to me a monk says inner peace. You know, that's to me what a monk is. All about inner peace, self-improvement, you know, all that crap. So it doesn't fit the Scar at all. Not even close. But when you look at it from a combat perspective, Scar would use hand-to-hand because they have talons and claws. They would be adept at fighting hand-to-hand with weapons, whatever. Now, you could argue and say that a warrior can fight with no weapons and be fine, okay? Yeah, I understand. But take any warrior, quote-unquote warrior. You show him a floppy plastic sword or his fist. He'll take the sword because it's something. It gives him reach. Yeah, he'll still punch him, but he's going to just distract him with the sword. He'll take the weapon every time. So, honestly, fighting with your hands as a warrior from the perspective of the Scar does not make sense. Because you will want weapons. You are a weapon master. That's the end of it. So, with monks as a Scar, I see them fitting in simply because they're the hand-to-hand, weaponless kind of fighter. I don't agree with the name Monk. I could agree with the EverQuest 2 moniker like Bruiser or a Brawler, but to me the Monk just screams too much inner peace, and this could be the D&D in me because I do read a lot of those style of novels. It just, I'm stuck in that, and I realize I'm stuck in that. So there's a bit of me that's always going to be like, it just doesn't fit.
Yeah. For me, I'm squarely in that I don't think that the Scar fits in with the monk. I just think that it fits with the Arakai, the Arkai. I can see that because they seem to be quite inner peace and focused in that regard. Also, the Dark Mirror throws me a bit, but I can understand why it can fit in there. Humans, obviously, the Scar seem chaotic, and it doesn't gel with me. I'd have to see more history of the Scar itself for me to be comfortable with it fitting in there.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a twist and something to maybe find out later why it's there. Maybe there's something that we ain't seeing, and necessarily Monk is the upper archetype of how to describe that class. You can still go down and have evil monks. You can still go down and basically split them apart. Bruiser, monk, this, that, and the other. You can go all different kinds of way. A monk,
ninja.
The only thing that basically screams for the monk is the discipline. It's all got to do with discipline, and discipline is not necessarily only a good thing.
Well, Scar don't even say discipline, because in their lore they even say they attack things on sight.
Yep.
Just because it's like, even if it's another Scar, one lone Scar, he's got a broken leg, eat him.
Maybe
Yeah.
that's the law enforcement within that.
So where's
within
the
encampment.
But where's the enlightenment? Where is the understanding of being a monk per se?
A monk does not necessarily have to have understanding. He has to have... No. Monk is basically somebody that can control their body, control their way of maybe seeing things, and that can even be, knocking somebody out. I don't need to be of pure enlightenment and pure goodness in my heart to be disciplined and to have a higher control of my body to knock somebody out. I can be an evil person and still have a high discipline, high control of my body. So that's why I see needs to be opened up and...
Well,
I see a druid being more of a monk than a Scar, because a Scar deals with motion at the end of the day. See something, hit it type of thing, rather than a dwarf who can actually think about, okay, this is what I'm going to deal with.
Here's the thing. Okay, let's assume every class can split into 2 trees, okay, down the road somehow. If, as a Scar, monk, it locks out the more inner peace, chi kind of thing. If it locks that out because you're a Scar, then I'm for it. Because there's no way a Scar would be that way, in my mind. He just all brute force. It's just all they scream. And then I'm cool with it, because now it kind of fits them. I don't want to see them like freaking something like from Dragon Ball shooting balls of chi and junk like that, and like, oh my god, like what have you done? Granted, we know for a fact that's not going to happen. But they just, I don't know, the monk doesn't scream brutality, but the Scar does. So I'm seeing it's kind of the conflict in that.
Yeah. It's definitely something to look on closely to see how they're going to define that class, or that the class in itself, to get a better understanding of the choice that they've made. We'll have to basically wait and see. A lot of valid points, but it's still something that you have to look at with a broader picture, with a more open mind. Don't look at it for the purest of what the monk describes as we know it. As I said, these guys are taking different bold steps and going and trying to redefine certain things, tweak it a bit and everything. So I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt for now, and we'll have to basically see how it evolves later on. So let's go and finish up this for now and bring up the screenshots, the latest screenshots from VR, which I'll bring up now. And these are the screenshots that were posted over the last couple of weeks from VR. Some really nice shots out there. They're not sorted. It's an image slideshow to go by. So enjoy the screenshots as they fly through your screen. Some nice things there. So we'll be back on Thursday, and we'll be talking about guilds. So that's going to be Thursday's topic, where we talk about the mechanics of guilds and what we would like to see happen. Talk about guilds in general as they've evolved over time throughout many different games, and talk about some of the things that we would like to see happen for guilds. There's actually a tweet that we put out on Twitter, a question asking if guilds should have requirements, standards or limitations when creating a guild, for instance. Let's say, for instance, and the example was, should there be a minimum of members needed to create a guild, yes or no? Or should it be free to whoever who wants to create a guild. Should there be limitations or not? Just to get the discussion going, I'll post the link for you guys to cast your vote if you haven't.
I'll give you a hint. There's a right and a wrong answer.
It'd be interesting to see what you guys think. Should there be a limitation or not on forming a guild? Cast your vote, and we'll discuss that on Thursday as well. And we'll just wait for these screenshots to... I don't know if it's repeated itself or not. But some awesome screenshots though. Viewpoints, you've got the... I think now on the screen you've got Wild's End from an upper view, looking down at those buildings there around that tree. And they are actually in size pretty big. I like the way they've formed and built the buildings in comparison to the characters, etc. It makes perfect sense. There's a good even balance.
I just love all the fine detail on some of these.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And I'm also very, very happy to see that nighttime is actually dark.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Good Lord, I'm so tired of that. Of course, the last one that just popped up. Why does Eridune have a torch? It's daytime. Just saying. Sorry, Brad.
So there we go. That's a slideshow of images. And on Thursday, we have the guild discussion. So join us on Thursday, 4 PM on this channel. Hopefully Twitch will be working again as it should. And you can then view it on Twitch or on Beam, however you prefer, or on YouTube. Yep. So join us on Thursday, 4 PM for the guild discussion. A lot to talk about on guilds. So we'll see what we can come up with and see some of your ideas as well. We'd definitely like to know what you think about guilds, what you would like to see, what you miss from being in a guild. So we'll see you all on Thursday.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys.